She's violating community conduct rules. Detain her. That's what Judith Crane, president of our HOA board, barked at the off-duty officer in front of half the neighborhood. No hearing, no warning, just a smug directive, like she owned the badge and my niece. Officer Darren Holt hesitated. Judith, she's 16. She resisted a compliance order, Judith snapped, holding her phone up like it was a badge of honor. That's a misdemeanor under our updated civility clause. Put her in the car. I was 3 steps away when it happened. Holt reached for Lily, gently, but Judith shoved past him and slammed my niece against the patrol car hood. Lily screamed. The officer's chest cam blinked red. The HOA sign loomed in the background like a threat carved in stone. She thought no one would question her. But here's the thing she didn't know. I manage the digital security for Maricopa County's entire evidence chain. That camera still pings back to my sandbox server. Subscribe now if you've ever watched someone in power cross the line and thought, please, let this one backfire. Because I've got 24 days before Lily's guardianship hearing, and if I don't clear her name, I lose her forever. My name is Ethan McCade. I don't wear a badge or carry a gun. I don't need to. I build the systems that verify what happened, when it counts, in court. And that blink you saw on Holt's chest? That was more than a light. It was a timestamp. It was a promise. Judith didn't know about the promise I made to my sister. 6 months ago, I signed the final hospice forms while Lily held her mother's hand. On her deathbed, my sister said, just don't let them label her. Don't let them make her a number. And I didn't think that moment would lead to this. To my niece being treated like a criminal because she wore jean shorts while washing my car in the driveway. It started as a warning letter. Public attire in shared view of community members may reflect poorly on property values. Judith dropped it off with a smile. She always smiles when she's threatening people. I filed it away, thought it was nonsense. Then came the fines, then the trespass warning. And now, this. Lily had barely taken 2 steps off the sidewalk when Judith called in her private hotline to SafeWatch Secure Cloud, our HOA's contracted patrol vendor. But Holt wasn't just a guard. He was a certified officer picking up extra hours. That gave this whole incident legal teeth. And it gave me something else, an evidence chain. While Judith ranted about community decency and non-compliance, I was watching the body cam's data packet sync in real time. I saw the metadata blip. I saw the footage upload, and I saw the moment it disappeared, not from the police database, from the private HOA cloud, which Judith has admin access to. She doesn't know I saw the deletion. She doesn't know I flagged the server timestamp on a, redundant endpoint. She doesn't know the blinking red light might have just cost her everything. She thinks this is about shorts. She thinks this is about rules. It's not. It's about power, and who gets to say what's decent. It's about what happens when one woman's authority is left unchecked for too long, and the quiet guy on the corner turns out to be the wrong person to pick a digital fight with. Judith slammed my niece into a police car under the desert sun in front of a neighborhood that stayed silent, but I didn't. She weaponized a rule book. I opened a command line, and now I've got 24 days to make sure a county judge sees exactly what happened that day, with all the sound, video, and location-verified rage intact. So ask yourself, where are you watching from? Because when the court plays the footage and Judith's voice echoes through those speakers, I want everyone to know, this isn't just my story, it's yours too. The next morning, a letter was taped to my front door. Second notice, repeated conduct violation. Judith's logo was embossed at the top, next to a pixelated clip art of a gavel. She always made it look official, like this neighborhood was her personal courthouse. I peeled it off without a word and brought it into the kitchen, dropping it on the table next to Lily's untouched cereal bowl. She hadn't come downstairs. She hadn't said a word since the patrol car. I scanned the letter while the coffee brewed. The wording was precise and vicious. Repeat incident involving inappropriate juvenile attire. Continued disregard for HOA standards. Possible consequences include formal disciplinary hearing, financial penalties, and involvement of local law enforcement per Section 3.8 of the Willowbrook Covenant. Section 3.8? I pulled out my PDF copy of the bylaws, version-controlled, time-stamped, and cross-indexed. Not because I trusted the HOA, because I didn't. Section 3.8 didn't cover attire. It was about decorum within common access amenities, like the pool or clubhouse, not private driveways. Judith was inventing authority and banking on nobody noticing. I noticed. She'd tried this before, with my neighbor Jasmine last year. Jasmine's daughter threw a quinceañera in the clubhouse. Judith fined them $750 for excessive guests. When Jasmine pushed back, she lost access to the community pool for 6 months. No hearing, just a memo. The worst part, nobody stopped her. Everyone just whispered and paid their fines. Better to keep the peace. But peace built on silence always collapses. I powered up my laptop and opened the private folder I'd started months ago. Willowbrook Audit, McCade. Inside were 12 letters, 5 fine notices, and 3 audio recordings I'd taken discreetly during HOA confrontations. All legal, all time-stamped, all categorized by topic. Most people keep photos of family. I keep proof. A pattern was emerging. One, that only becomes visible when you map it like data. Single parents, renters, people with cultural traditions Judith didn't like. Anyone who didn't fit her HOA version of pleasant suburban order got hit with sudden enforcement. This wasn't about rules, it was about control. My phone buzzed. Text from Jasmine. Got your back. If you push this, we're in. Just say when. I stared at the screen. Judith's power only worked when everyone stayed isolated. But if we connected the dots, if we showed this was systemic abuse under the guise of decorum enforcement, the whole illusion might crack. I took a breath and typed back, start gathering every letter she's ever sent you. Include screenshots. I'll organize it all. The HOA board met every third Thursday. That gave me 2 weeks to build something bulletproof. But I couldn't wait that long to protect Lily. I moved through the house, checking corners. Judith liked to patrol in the mornings. She'd stand at the corner mailbox like a sentry with a clipboard. I spotted her through the blinds, chatting with 2 board members, her arms folded like she was explaining why weeds were a moral issue. I turned away, walked down the hall, and tapped lightly on Lily's door. Hey, it's just me. Silence. I made you tea. Still nothing. I stood there for a moment, then left the cup on the floor by her door, the same way I used to do for my sister during chemo days when her body wouldn't let her leave bed. This house used to be quiet because it was peaceful. Now it was quiet because Judith had turned it into a courtroom. I went back to my desk and opened my mapping software. I started plotting incident locations against the HOA's enforcement dates. I flagged clusters of overreach, color-coded by resident demographics and timing. It was a tactic I'd used on contract corruption audits before. In this neighborhood, it told a story, a deliberate one. I didn't need to prove she was evil. I just needed to prove she was targeted, inconsistent, and unauthorized. Every violation Judith issued, every time she cited a clause that didn't apply or punished someone without due process, was another line of code in her downfall. The difference was, I knew how to read it, and I was done being polite. That night, I took the long way home. I didn't want to risk driving past the clubhouse. Judith had a habit of lurking outside it after board meetings, chatting with her inner circle like it was the Capitol building. But it wasn't Judith I saw when I passed Willowbrook's rust-red perimeter wall. It was him, Officer Darren Holt, still in partial uniform, gray polo with the Safe Watch logo, badge clipped to his belt like a reminder he had 2 masters now. He leaned against the side of his patrol SUV, arms folded, 1 foot braced against the rear tire. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't watching traffic. He was just standing there, frozen. I parked down the street, out of view, and walked up the sidewalk slow and easy. The gravel crunched under my shoes. When he saw me, he didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened, his fingers curled slightly inward. Evening, I said. He didn't answer. I stopped 2 paces away. Did they debrief you? He blinked. Debrief? About what happened with Lily, or about the footage? Holt exhaled, looked down at his boots. They told me to file it under non-force assist, said it didn't meet the threshold for a use of force review. I nodded slowly. Except your chest cam was recording the entire time. Silence. He looked up at me, eyes bloodshot. The kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. I didn't agree with what she did. But you didn't stop her. That landed. His mouth twitched, just once, and he dropped his gaze again. I didn't think she'd actually touch her, he said quietly. Judith said she'd escalate the matter with the HOA board if I didn't issue a citation, that it could reflect on my secondary employment record. There it was, the leash. Holt wasn't a villain. He was caught in the machinery, too new, too cautious, too afraid to lose two incomes. I've seen it in tech, too. Good people paralyzed by bad systems. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a flash drive. I'm not here to shame you. I'm here because you have something Judith wants to disappear. He didn't take it right away. His hand hovered, fingers twitching at the edge of the drive, like it was radioactive. That footage you recorded, it synced to the HOA's cloud. I saw the data packet transfer, and I saw the deletion log. His eyes snapped to mine. You what? I build forensic redundancy systems for the county. I have access to a sandbox node connected to the vendor's public server farm. That feed passed through it, briefly, and I archived the metadata. His lips parted, then closed again. He looked like he was trying to speak, but his tongue couldn't catch the right gear. I never deleted it, he said finally. They said the camera glitched, that the vendor lost the sync. I filed my report based on what they told me. Then you're already in the clear, I said, unless you stay quiet. He ran a hand down the back of his neck. If I go on record, I lose the contract, maybe my job. If you don't, Lily gets tagged as a juvenile delinquent, and a woman who assaulted a minor walks with HOA immunity. His breathing changed, shallow, fast. Then he nodded. Just once, sharp and clean. Like he'd finally torn something inside loose. I'll give you what I've got, but not here. I know a place. We agreed to meet 2 days later, off-site. Quiet diner, no board members, no surveillance. As I walked away, I glanced back once. He was still standing in the same spot, but now his arms had dropped. His shoulders had slumped, like he'd just finished digging a trench. I didn't need him to be brave. I just needed him to be honest. Because the footage might have been corrupted, but Darren Holt was the living checksum I needed to validate every bite. And Judith Crane, she'd just lost her firewall. 2 days later, the HOA fired the first real shot. Not a letter this time. A notice posted publicly on the community bulletin board outside the clubhouse. A laminated sheet with Judith's signature at the bottom and bold red font across the top. Special emergency review of resident behavior, 6 p.m. HOA Boardroom. It named me, by full legal name. It claimed I had openly threatened HOA security personnel and disrupted enforcement protocols critical to neighborhood harmony. It said a vote would be held to determine whether I would face community probation, whatever that meant. I stared at it in the hot afternoon sun, surrounded by rose bushes and freshly swept pavement, while Judith stood 10 feet away, holding court. She wore her usual pastel blazer-like armor, speaking softly to a cluster of residents nodding at every word. Her voice was calm, even warm, until her eyes flicked to me. No nod, no smile, just a razor-thin smirk. She thought I'd stay quiet because I had something to lose. She didn't realize I'd already moved my server backups to off-site storage, encrypted my logs, and pre-emailed my findings to a list of safe recipients, including 2 county contacts and 1 HOA compliance watchdog group I used to audit tech for. She wanted escalation? Fine. I walked into the boardroom at 6:01 p.m. The air was cool but tense, chairs arranged like we were in a courtroom. 5 board members sat behind a long table. Judith sat in the middle, tapping a pen. One hand rested on a printed copy of the original HOA bylaws before the digital revision. She was going to quote clauses, twist them into weapons. "I trust you've read the notice, Mr. McCade," she said without looking up. "I did," I replied, standing, "and your phrasing was creative. The board has concerns," she continued, "not just about your niece's repeated non-compliance, but your interference with security personnel and use of non-approved devices on HOA property." That was new. She was trying to frame my home surveillance as unauthorized network activity, probably hoping to argue that any data I pulled, including the metadata from Holt's body cam, was invalid because it was retrieved through unauthorized electronic means. But she'd made a mistake. She didn't know I'd logged my own system's MAC address routing path the day the footage uploaded. It was still sitting in my audit chain, untouched, time-stamped, and matching SafeWatch's own public server path. And more importantly, I'd used a publicly accessible relay node, completely legal. She looked at the board. We're recommending a formal censure. If approved, Mr. McCade's property will lose access to community utilities including clubhouse, pool, and security assistance. And my niece? I asked. Judith's tone hardened. A formal record of noncompliance will be included in her residency file. Should guardianship concerns arise, that record would be visible. My hands clenched at my sides. I felt every eye in the room watching, waiting to see if I'd snap. That's how Judith played it. Push you until you broke, then claim you were the threat all along. Instead, I pulled out a small envelope and placed it gently on the table. These are copies of every HOA violation I've received, annotated, indexed, and cross-checked with your own bylaw documentation. Alongside it, you'll find metadata from the SafeWatch incident, including file deletion logs and path traces, each legally obtained and stored. Judith didn't move, but one of the board members, an older man named Ray, I barely knew, shifted uncomfortably. You can bury the truth, I said evenly, but in doing so, you become the record I recover next. I turned and left before anyone could speak. Outside, dusk had started to settle. Porch lights flickered on, sprinklers hissed. In that silence, my phone buzzed. It was Holt. She knows I met you, said if I don't clarify my report, I lose my badge. I typed back, don't. I've secured the footage path. It's traceable. I'll handle the legal side. Just sit tight. Judith had just made a critical mistake, trying to take me down with the exact systems I understood better than anyone in the room. I wasn't just pushing back now. I was laying track. 2 hours after the boardroom ambush, I was pacing the parking garage beneath the Maricopa County IT Annex building, staring at a blinking cursor on my laptop screen. I hadn't gone home. Not yet. Lily was safe with Jasmine for the night, and I needed space, neutral ground, if I was going to dig deep without risking HOA surveillance. The Willowbrook Reserve contract didn't just cover physical patrol. Judith had pushed for cloud-integrated compliance enhancements last year, meaning cameras on street corners, some of them feeding into SafeWatch's tenant-facing app. There were blind spots, but not many. Here, under the city's concrete and sodium lights, my laptop was a scalpel. I ran the footage sync trace again. There it was. A 3.1 millisecond handshake from Holt's chest cam. Server ID, SWSync node 89. The exact relay that SafeWatch used for temporary storage before backing up to HOA archives. I'd seen this structure a dozen times when testing patch updates for vendor clients, but something didn't add up. The footage packet timestamped 6:13:02 p.m. Judith's deletion log read 6:12:44 p.m. That wasn't possible. How could she delete a file that hadn't finished uploading yet? Unless... I dug deeper, opening the packet trace logs. Each video transfer used a checksum, an encrypted signature verifying the file's authenticity. I isolated the signature from the deleted segment and compared it to the raw checksum data in my local sandbox cache. Mismatch. Judith hadn't deleted the file. She'd replaced it. That changed everything. If this had gone to court with only a missing video, she could have played dumb, blamed corruption, blamed Holt, blamed me. But now she'd tampered with official security footage. That was criminal. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I compiled a metadata comparison, pre- and post-deletion. The hash values didn't align. I captured packet origin headers, tied to Judith's admin credentials on the HOA network, ones she likely thought were untraceable. Except they weren't. Every HOA vendor system piggybacks off the same authentication hub tied to their contract API. And I'd helped build that hub 5 years ago. She'd used her HOA credentials to log in and overwrite the footage. That action generated a unique hash, a digital fingerprint, tied directly to her login session. I cross-referenced the login IP with archived logs from the vendor sandbox node. Match confirmed. Judith Crane had logged in from her personal tablet at 6:12 p.m. She'd accessed the incident directory, she'd replaced the file, and she'd done it under her own name. I backed up everything, printed the summary report, sent encrypted copies to a secure Gmail drop, and uploaded a mirrored copy to a password-protected county admin folder. My hands trembled as I pulled the flash drive out of the port. This wasn't just HOA overreach anymore. This was digital evidence tampering under Arizona Revised Statutes 13-2407. Class 6 felony. It wasn't theoretical, it was traceable and admissible. My phone buzzed again, another text from Holt. "Are we still safe to meet tomorrow?" I replied. "Yes, but everything's changed. Bring your original patrol logs and come alone." I shut the laptop, leaned against the concrete pillar, and let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I'd seen misuse before. I'd seen corruption buried beneath paperwork and polite meetings, but never this personal. Judith had wrapped herself in bylaws and bureaucracy so tightly that most people believed she was the law. Now, I had the one thing she couldn't bury, proof that she wasn't. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I watched the sun rise through the window of a 24-hour diner on the edge of Mesa, just far enough from Willowbrook that no one would recognize me, but close enough to make it back before Lily woke up. My laptop sat open in front of me, screen dimmed, flash drive still tucked in my pocket like a loaded weapon. The waitress had stopped asking if I wanted anything else. At 7:02 a.m., the bell over the door jingled. Officer Darren Holt stepped in. He looked worse than before, like someone had sanded the edges off his resolve overnight. Red eyes, unshaven jaw, a nervous twitch in his right hand as he scanned the room and spotted me. He slid into the booth, across from me, without a word, pulled off his ball cap and rubbed the back of his neck. "You sure this is secure?" he asked quietly. I turned the laptop screen toward him. It showed a mirror of the SafeWatch login portal, the very one Judith had used. Right now, more secure than the HOA's bank account. That got the faintest flicker of a smirk. He pulled a folded printout from his jacket, his original patrol log from the night Judith assaulted Lily. Logged time, location, notes. But most importantly, no mention of Lily resisting, no mention of physical restraint, just a vague line. Verbal altercation with HOA board member. Resolved without escalation. He'd written it that way to avoid filing a use of force report, to protect himself, to protect Judith. "You know this contradicts the revised report your boss submitted?" I said. Holt nodded slowly. "I didn't write that version." "Who did?" His jaw clenched. Judith sent a revised log the next day, said it needed clarification for liability reasons. Told me to approve it through the SafeWatch internal portal. "And you did?" He hesitated. "I didn't click anything, but I didn't contest it either." My throat tightened. "That report went to the HOA's insurer." "I know," he said. He slid the log across the table. "This is the only version I stand by." I took it without a word and placed it inside a manila folder along with the packet logs I'd compiled. The outline was starting to take shape, one I could present cleanly, surgically. The vendor logs show the file was accessed and overwritten from an IP registered to Judith's personal tablet, I told him. I have the routing history, login metadata, and timestamp of deletion, all traced through a sandbox server that still cached the header data. He didn't respond, just stared at the table like it might collapse under the weight of what we were saying. "I'm submitting everything tomorrow," I continued, "to a judge. Petition for emergency injunction and forensic recovery of HOA system archives." His head came up fast. "Tomorrow? We don't wait now. If we delay, she'll have time to pull every thread out of that system." Holt looked down at his hands. "She'll bury me," he muttered, "even if I don't go public. She'll tell the department I falsified a report. I'll lose my cert, my pension." I leaned in. "Not if you come in as a whistleblower. You signed nothing. You've got the original log. You were under pressure from a non-government actor with access she never should have had." He looked at me like I was speaking a different language, one part fear, one part disbelief. "I can't promise they won't try to smear you," I added, "but I can promise I'll be in the room when they do, and that I'll have the evidence to shut it down." He didn't move for a long time. Then, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a second flash drive. "What's this?" "The body cam backup," he said. "From my personal unit. I didn't upload it when the system glitched. I kept it local, just in case." I froze. "You're sure it's the full recording?" He nodded, front to back, audio and all. I swallowed hard and took it like it was something holy. Everything Judith had tried to scrub was here, untouched, untampered, admissible. The moment she laid hands on Lily, preserved. "Thank you," I said. He stood up. Don't thank me yet. As he left the diner, the flash drive burned cold in my palm. Judith Crane had no idea what was coming, and I was done waiting. I didn't drive straight home after Holt left the diner. Instead, I veered toward the county library, a quiet, glass-walled building I'd used years ago when prepping a corruption audit. The far corner study rooms were nearly soundproof, and the public Wi-Fi was segmented from anything private. No one would expect me there at 8 in the morning. I set up my laptop on a wooden table near the window, dropped Holt's flash drive into the port, and waited for the green light. My hands were steady, but my stomach felt like a fist tightening. This was it. The files loaded instantly, a full-length video from Holt's chest cam, time-stamped to the second. The moment Judith shoved Lily into the patrol car, the audio snapped alive. Every word, every command, every gasp. Clear as day. No glitch, no corruption. I hit pause halfway through and leaned back, staring at the frozen frame, Judith's hand on Lily's shoulder, Holt's stunned expression, the HOA sign looming behind them like a bad watermark. This was the moment she'd thought she'd erased. The door to the study room clicked open. Holt stepped in, glancing over his shoulder before shutting it quietly. He didn't sit right away. He stood near the wall, arms crossed, head lowered like a man walking into a confessional booth. "I can't keep this to myself anymore," he said. I gestured to the chair. "Sit. Tell me everything." He slid into the seat opposite me. His eyes darted to the paused video, then to my face. "That night," he began, voice low, "Judith called me before I even got to Lily. Told me she'd filed a disturbance in progress report. Said there was vandalism and possible threat to a board member's safety. Dispatch flagged it as a security emergency. That's why I rolled in hot." I frowned. There was no vandalism. "I know," he said, rubbing his forehead. "She staged it. Claimed she'd seen Lily spray painting offensive words near the clubhouse. She wanted me to treat it like a criminal act. Told me to handcuff her to prevent flight." My jaw tightened. "And you believed her?" He winced. "I didn't see spray paint, but when I questioned her, she said the HOA cameras had caught it. She made it sound like she had proof. She used my badge like a crowbar." I pulled up the SafeWatch activity log on the screen. "There was no spray paint alert in the system that night. I've already checked." "I know," he whispered. "I found out later. No alert, no complaint from dispatch. It was just her word. She also told me afterward to classify the incident as juvenile harassment. Said the footage was compromised and would only confuse matters if uploaded." "That's when she deleted it," I said. He nodded. "She called me into her office the next morning, off the record, showed me a draft of the revised report with my name on it, said if I didn't sign, she'd tell my captain I'd mishandled a minor, said she had video evidence of me standing by while a resident defaced property. I didn't know she doctored it. I just panicked." He shoved his hands into his hair, elbows on the table. "I didn't sign, but I didn't stop her either. I thought keeping my head down would make it go away. But then she told me about Lily's guardianship hearing, said if you didn't cooperate, she'd forward a community complaint about you to the court." I stared at him. "She said that?" He nodded. "She's been threatening you through me for weeks, using me as the messenger so nothing leads back to her." I exhaled slowly. "You just gave me the missing piece, Darren." He looked up. "What piece?" "Intent. She manufactured a false incident, tampered with evidence, and leveraged her position to interfere with a legal guardianship. That's not just misconduct. That's criminal coercion." He swallowed hard. "You think a judge will see it that way?" I turned the laptop toward him, showing the paused frame again. "Once they see this with your original log, they won't just see it, they'll hear it. Her voice ordering you to detain a minor over a fake crime." Holt's shoulders sagged. His fingers tapped nervously against the table, then went still. "Then let's do it," he said quietly. "No more hiding." For the first time since this started, he met my eyes without flinching. And I realized something. Judith hadn't just lost her firewall. She'd lost her last willing accomplice. By the time I left the library, my plan wasn't just forming, it was operational. I drove straight to a co-working office in downtown Scottsdale, one I'd used during pandemic rotations. Clean, discreet, and most importantly, off any HOA radar. The front desk didn't ask questions when I booked the corner suite. I paid in cash. Inside, I spread out everything. Holt's original patrol log, the flash drive with the full recording, the metadata packets, the forged report, and Judith's name tied to every login timestamp. 100 pieces that didn't look like much on their own. But I wasn't building a pile. I was building a chain of custody. I opened my secure shell terminal and connected to the backup node I'd mirrored off SafeWatch's public sync server, SWS Sync Node 89. The node had automatically captured the original header data and stored it in a sandbox. SafeWatch never noticed the redundancy because I'd left it disguised as a failed handshake packet. But it hadn't failed. It had recorded the overwrite Judith initiated, then marked the new file as a duplicate, and cached the old checksum for audit trace. I copied it all into a court-friendly readout. Visual timestamps, packet origin trails, and hash mismatches. Then I opened the file Holt had handed me, the unaltered body cam feed, and layered it over the footage Judith had tried to replace it with. The contrast was devastating. In the real footage, Judith is the aggressor. She shouts, curses, grabs Lily by the arm, and yanks her forward. Holt says twice, "Let me handle it," but Judith brushes him off and slams my niece against the hood. Lily screams. In the fake footage, there's a 2-minute glitch where everything goes silent. A clean edit, the moment of assault disappears. Holt's warnings, cut. Judith's actions, vanished. The overwrite was amateur, sloppy even, but she'd counted on no one knowing where to look. I wasn't anyone. I was the guy who built the trail. Next, I drafted the affidavit. I kept the tone professional, factual, but left nothing vague. I described how I'd come across the file discrepancy through routine review. I cited my professional credentials, my secure access to the public node, and the vendor's metadata guidelines. Every word was calibrated for admissibility. Then I uploaded it all into a secure drive and submitted a pre-injunction packet to the county clerk through the emergency filing portal, petitioning for a temporary restraining order and forensic recovery of HOA digital infrastructure. That wasn't just paperwork. That was a legal sledgehammer. Once granted, it would authorize a court-appointed digital examiner to retrieve all logs, security feeds, internal emails, and server activity from Willowbrook's HOA network, and it would freeze further tampering. I gave the system a final sweep, checked for file integrity, then shut everything down. Next step, mobilize witnesses. I sent a discreet text to Jasmine. Need your copy of the fine from your daughter's quinceañera. HOA overreach pattern, time sensitive. Her response came instantly. Already in a folder, you're not alone in this. Then I emailed Ray, the only board member who looked visibly shaken during the emergency censure meeting. Subject, off the record, need 5 minutes. Body, you don't need to choose sides, but if this goes to court and you stay silent, the HOA won't protect you. Judith isn't just abusive, she's provably criminal. I'll bring the packet, you read it, then decide. I hit send and leaned back. Everything was in motion now. Every log, every signature, every moment of Holt's restraint and Judith's violence. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I wasn't even doing it just for Lily anymore. I was doing it because the next girl Judith tried to silence might not have a camera pointed at her. And the next quiet IT guy might not know how to trace a tampered feed across 4 servers. But I did. And now, so would a judge. I got the email less than 24 hours later. Subject, temporary injunction approved, immediate action authorized. It felt like something uncoiled inside my chest when I read those words. I was sitting in the visitor lobby of the Maricopa County Courthouse, folder in hand, suit barely fitting, right after months of avoiding formal wear. But it didn't matter. We'd crossed the threshold. The judge had reviewed the evidence, Holt's unaltered footage, the falsified report, the server logs, the packet trace, and she didn't hesitate. The injunction gave us the green light. Court-appointed digital examiners would be dispatched to retrieve the full contents of Willowbrook's HOA servers. That included Judith's access logs, her emails, and the raw backup feeds that SafeWatch had never scrubbed clean. But to make sure nothing went sideways, I needed one more thing: physical backup. I walked down the courthouse steps and met Holt in the parking lot. He wore his full police uniform today, not his SafeWatch polo. The badge on his chest gleamed in the morning sun. Not flashy, just real. "You ready?" I asked. He nodded, jaw set. "Let's finish it." We drove in separate cars, just a precaution. If Judith saw us arriving together, she'd smell the setup. The plan was simple. We'd enter the Willowbrook Reserve Community Center during Judith's scheduled HOA update meeting. A digital forensics team, 2 examiners and 1 process server, would arrive 10 minutes after us with a printed warrant and begin the live retrieval of system data. I'd already coordinated the process with a clerk. They'd mirror the operation from a laptop inside the mobile van parked out front. If Judith tried to deny access or interfere, the examiners had full authority to lock her out of her own system and flag her for obstruction. We arrived 5 minutes before the meeting started. The community center was all stucco and steel trim, designed to look clean and harmless, fake friendliness baked into every line. Inside, Judith was already seated at the board table, surrounded by 2 HOA members and a handful of residents, some loyal, some curious. She looked up and froze when she saw me walk in. "Mr. McCade," she said carefully, "this is a closed update session. You're not on the agenda." "Neither is obstruction of justice," I replied. She blinked, a flicker of something sharp behind her eyes. "Excuse me?" Before I could answer, the double doors swung open behind me. The examiners stepped in. One of them, a woman named Lopez, handed the official notice to Judith without a word. The seal of the court was stamped in red on the top. "This is an authorized forensic seizure," Lopez said calmly. "Effective immediately." Judith's smile cracked. "This is a violation of our private governance," she said, voice rising. "We're a private HOA. You can't just—" "We can," Holt said from the back of the room. "And we are." Judith turned to him, furious. "You—" "Don't," he said quietly. Not another word. Lopez and the other examiner moved past her toward the small glass-walled server room attached to the office wing. I knew what they'd find: the sync logs, the access timestamps, the scrubbed footage attempts, the alternate report files Judith had saved under fake folder names like draft notes and archived claims. It was all there, and as the data was copied over into the examiner's encrypted drives, a screen was cast onto the room's main projector. Residents watched in stunned silence as rows of log entries filled the screen. Judith Craney, Willowbrook admin, 06/12:44 p.m. Video access. Incident Lily Patrol W1 file replaced. She tried to speak, tried to explain, but no one was listening anymore. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to argue. The metadata did the work for me. When it was over, the examiners left with a full mirror of the system. The court would review it, but the evidence was already undeniable. The spell had broken. Neighbors avoided Judith's eyes as she packed up her things. She didn't speak to me, just walked past, blazer trembling slightly, jaw clenched tight. As she reached the exit, she turned one last time. "This isn't over," she said. "No," I replied, "but your reign is." The next 48 hours felt like standing in the eye of a storm. Nothing happened publicly, but behind the scenes, the system churned. The digital forensics team confirmed what we already knew. Judith had accessed the HOA's cloud admin panel from her personal tablet and manually overwritten the security footage minutes after the incident. She labeled it a corrupted sync patch and bypassed the SafeWatch internal audit chain, using elevated permissions she should never have had. The data hadn't just been tampered with. It had been intentionally manipulated to obstruct a potential legal process involving a minor. Now it was official, documented, packaged, time-stamped, certified. The county attorney's office reviewed the logs, Holt's statement, and the body cam footage. A referral was issued within a day. Judith wasn't arrested yet, but she was informed by certified mail that she was under formal investigation for digital evidence tampering and coercive interference in a guardianship matter, which made what she did next even more reckless. Saturday morning, a notice appeared on every front door in Willowbrook Reserve, not emailed, not mailed, physically posted. Special election, immediate vote to dissolve HOA board leadership. But this wasn't Judith's doing. It came from Ray Pillar, the quiet board member who'd barely spoken, at the censure meeting, and now he'd moved against her. By Saturday evening, the whole neighborhood was buzzing. Families gathered in driveways, residents whispered in front yards, group chats lit up like firecrackers. For the first time in years, the fear Judith had ruled with wasn't working. Her silence looked like guilt. Her absence looked like surrender. But I wasn't celebrating. I was preparing. At 9 p.m., I met Ray on his porch. His dog barked once, then sat silently by the door. He offered me a beer, which I declined. "You sure you want to lead this?" I asked him. He nodded. I should have stopped her years ago. We talked logistics, voter count, bylaws, required quorum. Ray had already pulled the HOA charter. A full leadership vote could be triggered with 40% community support. With everything that had surfaced, that wouldn't be hard. "I need your help with the presentation," he added. "People trust you now. They need to understand the facts, not just the feelings." "I'll keep it simple," I said. "Show them what she did. Show them how she lied." Ray looked away, voice low. "She threatened my wife's business permit last fall. Said if we didn't approve her landscaping contract renewal, she'd flag our yard for non-conforming drought compliance." I stared at him. "Why didn't you come forward?" "Because she's been doing it for years," he said, "and most of us just let her. Not anymore." Sunday morning, flyers went out with the HOA seal. Ray's team had access to the official template. The vote would be held Tuesday at 6 p.m., right after the public evidence presentation. And that was my job. I spent the next 24 hours building the exhibit, not a rant, not a takedown, just the truth. I sorted the metadata logs into a visual timeline, marked with red flags every time Judith had overstepped her authority. I compiled her login timestamps, cross-referenced the forged report, and paired them with Holt's signed statement. At the end of the presentation, I embedded the full, unedited footage of Lily's detention, frame by frame, with audio intact. And then I added one final slide, a quote from the HOA charter Judith used like scripture. "The purpose of this board is to serve the well-being of the community, not the comfort of its leadership." Under it, I added, "Decency is not what you wear. It's how you wield power when no one's watching." I printed the presentation onto poster boards, uploaded a mirrored version onto a locked tablet for the meeting. Everything was ready, and as I stepped outside to breathe in the warm Arizona dusk, porch lights flicking on around me, I felt something shift. We weren't just pushing back anymore. We were rebuilding the rules from the ground up. The community hall was packed by 5:50 p.m. Folding chairs scraped against tile as neighbors filed in, some in workout clothes, some still in office attire, a few dragging lawn, chairs from home when the seating ran out. It was the first full turnout Willowbrook Reserve had seen in years, and the reason was obvious. Judith wasn't at the front table. She sat off to the side instead, lips pursed, arms crossed over a beige blazer-like body armor. The usual smile was gone. In her place at the podium stood Ray Pillar, sleeves rolled up, HOA charter in hand, voice steady but dry. "This is a special election triggered by Article 4, Section 9, he began. "Tonight, we'll begin with a presentation of recent findings involving board conduct, followed by a vote to dissolve and restructure leadership." Murmurs spread across the room. I sat in the front row, tablet in hand, flash drive already slotted into the projector. Jasmine gave me a quick nod from the aisle. Holt stood near the door in uniform, arms folded, not as security, but as a witness. He wasn't hiding anymore. Ray stepped back and motioned to me. I stood and walked to the front, heart beating like a slow drum in my chest. Not fear, just weight. "Evening," I said. "My name's Ethan McCade. I've lived here a little over a year. Some of you know me, most don't. But what you should know is that I work in digital forensic compliance for Maricopa County's IT division. And I know when something's been tampered with." I tapped the screen. The first slide appeared, a timeline, clean and color-coded. "This is what happened on July 6th. I walked them through it. The fabricated spray paint claim, the false report, the body cam footage, the forged incident log. Every event Judith had orchestrated, labeled with precise timestamps, backed by packet logs and login credentials. People stopped shifting in their seats. They started leaning forward. At the 10-minute mark, I played the original body cam footage. The lights dimmed. Judith's voice filled the room, sharp, commanding, almost shrill as she shouted at a 16-year-old girl and physically shoved her into a police car. Gasps rippled through the audience. When the clip ended, I didn't speak right away. I just let the silence settle. Then I clicked to the final slide, A split-screen comparison of the real video and the doctored file side by side, 2 minutes of missing audio, a false version of reality, scrubbed clean of guilt. This wasn't an error, I said. It was a cover-up, one that endangered a minor, weaponized this board's authority, and tried to stain a family's legal custody process with a lie. I turned away from the screen and looked at them. All of you paid dues expecting safety, fairness, and accountability. What you got was someone using your trust to punish the people who couldn't push back. Judith stood slowly. "This is a biased presentation," she said, voice shaking with tight control. "He has a personal vendetta. This is one side of a story." "No," Ray interrupted from behind her. "This is evidence, and you never once told the board the footage had been edited. I was trying to protect the community from misinformation." "You falsified a police report," Jasmine said loudly from the audience. More voices joined in. "You fined my daughter for hanging a pride flag. You told me I couldn't plant roses because it violated uniformity standards. You shut off my water meter last year, without notice." The crowd surged with fury, not violence, just years of muffled frustration cracking open all at once. Judith looked around, realizing she no longer had a room full of followers, just people finally seeing clearly. Ray raised his voice. "Those in favor of dissolving the current HOA board leadership and initiating a community-led election under Article 4, raise your hands." Hands shot up, rows and rows of them. When the final count was tallied, it wasn't even close. Judith didn't speak again. She picked up her purse, turned toward the back exit, and walked out without a word. Holt held the door open as she passed, not as a courtesy, but as a boundary. And when the door clicked shut behind her, someone in the back started to clap. Then another. Then everyone. We hadn't just voted her out. We'd taken the whole system back. 3 weeks later, a maintenance truck pulled up to my driveway. No logos, no clipboard. Just a single worker with a concrete post, a drill, and a weather-sealed plaque wrapped in brown paper. He didn't say much, just asked, "You the guy who cleared the board out?" I nodded. He smiled, nodded back, and got to work. 20 minutes later, the plaque stood where Judith's first violation notice had been taped to my front door all those months ago. It was bolted into the soil beside the walkway, angled slightly toward the sidewalk. "Integrity has no dress code. Willowbrook Reserve Community Vote, August 8th. I stared at it longer than I expected to. Not because it was flashy, it wasn't, but because it felt real, like something permanent had finally been planted in a place where fear used to grow. Lily stepped out onto the porch behind me. She still hadn't said much since the night of the confrontation, but she was smiling more, sleeping through the night again, talking to Jasmine's daughter about applying to community college. Every small thing was a victory. She looked at the plaque, then back at me. "Did you design that?" she asked. "Ray's idea," I said. "I just approved the font." She grinned. "It's not bad, kinda classy." We both laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. Later that day, I walked the neighborhood. I didn't say much, just nodded to neighbors who now looked me in the eye instead of avoiding my gaze. Jasmine waved from her garden. Ray was in his garage, prepping folding chairs for the next open board meeting. Yes, open now, with full community access. Holt passed by on his bike, off-duty but still wearing his badge. Judith hadn't been seen since the vote. We heard she'd lawyered up. The county attorney's office was moving slowly but methodically. The investigation was real, the packet was ironclad, and the evidence trail wasn't going away. But none of that mattered to me as much as what was happening. The bylaws were being rewritten, publicly, with resident input. The landscaping fines, paused. The decency clause, repealed. Residents were forming committees not for enforcement, but for community events, local outreach, and restoring the sense of neighborhood that Judith had hollowed out over the years. I'd been asked to help lead the Digital Transparency Subcommittee. I said yes, but I made it clear I wasn't here to govern, just to make sure the next Ethan McCade wouldn't have to fight this battle from scratch. That night, I stood out front again and watched the sun drop behind the stucco rooftops. The Arizona sky turned the color of rusted copper. The cicadas started buzzing, and everything felt still, peaceful, not because things were perfect, but because people weren't afraid anymore. It didn't take a lawyer or a badge or a loud voice to get here. It just took someone who knew how to trace a pattern, who paid attention to the little things, timestamps, inconsistencies, silent corners of code, and didn't look away when someone in power tried to twist the truth. Judith thought she could delete a moment and rewrite it to suit her needs. She didn't understand that moments leave fingerprints, and I'd spent my whole life learning how to read them. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now. Share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because this wasn't just a one-time thing. This is happening in communities everywhere, and it only takes one well-placed timestamp, one body cam sync, one neighbor brave enough to speak up, to bring it all to light. So, if you're holding on to something, an incident, a lie, a rule twisted to hurt instead of help, don't bury it, bring it forward. Sometimes justice starts with something as small as a blinking red light and ends with a vote that changes everything.